Our next presenter is Dr. James Milgram. He's a professor of mathematics emeritus at Stanford University, internationally recognized researcher in mathematics, and one of the authors of the Pre-Common Core California Standards, and was the primary reviewer of the National Council of Teacher Mathematics Curriculum Focus Points. Thank you for being with us here today, Doctor, and the floor is yours.
Let me start by talking about the famous 20-year education cycle. A very well-known education historian, Diane Ravitch, noted in her book Left Back that every 20 years or so, people start complaining to the education schools that our K-12 outcomes are not improving in math. In fact, they seem to be getting worse. The education schools then respond, we can fix the problem. And they present exactly the same programs and curricula that they presented 20 years earlier. They tell the small group that remembers 20 years back that we had improperly implemented their programs then, so the failure was not their fault. This time, we need to spend more money and everything will be fine, they say. And legislators routinely buy into this wishful thinking. I'm actually reminded of Albert Einstein's famous definition of insanity here. Doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. So, in California, which is where I am, in the late 1980s and well into the 1990s, we had standards that pushed the most populous state in the country in the direction that the education schools were telling us was best. Of course, our outcomes became quite dismal very quickly. The remediation rate in our state university system in mathematics, the system that admits the entire top 30% of California high school students, shot up from 23% remediation in 1989 to 56% in 1997. Our top high-tech employers were complaining loudly to the legislature about not being able to hire high school graduates for basic jobs since these graduates no longer had the necessary core arithmetic and algebra skills. Back in 1994, 1995, the education schools had been saying, stay the course. These programs are what students need for the 21st century. But parents and high-end employees were no longer buying it, so we had what became known as the math wars. Unfortunately, today, with core standards, we seem to be reliving this dismal period, but this time nationally. It is worth noting, I think, that one of the three lead writers of the Common Core Mathematics Standards, Mr. Phil Darrow, had been the chief architect of the 1992 California Mathematics Standards that started this progression that we're talking about now. So, welcome to California in 1993. We are hearing the same rhetoric now as then, and we are even being presented with the exact same curriculum programs that we in California got rid of in 1997. And indeed, the chief difference between then and now is that this time, all of this is being presented nationwide. So, a couple points here. The Common Core Math Standards are, first of all, a political document written in such a manner that it could be interpreted in many different ways and get buy-in in many different ways. So parents who have some technical backgrounds will find standards like fluently multiply and divide whole numbers using the standard algorithms. They're there. But education girls will also find standards which are virtually identical to the fuzzy math standards in the 1992 California standards. And in fact, the education community is already ignoring the standard algorithms and is focusing on fuzzy math. CCMS, that's the Common Core Math Standards, claims that its intent is to correct the problems with K-12 education in mathematics, and if followed faithfully, will make all high school graduates workforce and college ready. It is said also that CCMS will strengthen the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math pipeline, and thereby rescue our economy. In fact, it does none of this. And in fact, it focuses almost entirely on students whose intent is to enter junior colleges. So CCMS is way below international expectations. I would grade the standards as follows. Grades K through 5 are considerably above average for our states and nearly as good as the best standards, those in California, Massachusetts, Indiana, Minnesota, and Washington. But not nearly as good as those, but better than the remaining by quite a bit. 6 through 7, grades 6 through 7, however, at best average, probably below average. 8 just is spinning the wheels, and high school, that's where the real problems are. High school is a disaster. Now, in January 2010, I've already mentioned Phil Darrow, one of the first lead writer of the standards. The second lead author in January 2010, Dr. William McCollum, explained the standards as follows. The document that was being referred to, I completely agree, is not what we aspire to for our children, is not what we as a nation want to set as a final deliverable. I completely agree with that. Then in March of 2010, the third and last of the three authors, Dr. Jason Zimba, testified in front of the Massachusetts State Board of Education that we have agreement to the extent that it's a fuzzy definition that the minimally college-ready student is a student who has passed Algebra 2. This is an extraordinarily weak standard. It's exactly the standard that leads to minimal acceptance in a community college. It's the least amount of math you can really have to enter even a community college. Only about 1 in 3 students whose highest math course in high school was Algebra 2 will ever obtain a 4-year college degree in any subject. And there's only a 1 in 50 chance that STEM intending student with this background will ever get a 4-year degree in any STEM area. It's worth noting also that Zimba, the third lead writer, clarified his Algebra 2 definition later in his testimony by stating that CCMS is not for STEM, and he expanded on that by saying, and I quote, not only not for them, it's also not for selective colleges. For example, for UC Berkeley, whether you're going to be an engineer or not, you'd better have pre-calculus to get into UC Berkeley. Thus, we are actually preparing kids for success at a community college or perhaps a non-selective college like the University of Phoenix. In particular, Common Core entirely abandons the top 30% of our typical high school graduating classes. The reason I say 30% is as follows. In California, we have 2 university systems, the University of California system and the California State University system. The University of California system guarantees admission to the top 10% of any California high school class, graduating class, while CSU, California State Universities, guarantees admission to the top 30%.
Dr. Milgram, you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. In the case of UC, a student who has not gone further than the CCMS expectations is currently not even eligible for admission, and CSU, they may be eligible, but the expectation is that they would have to take either a remedial math course or trigonometry and pre-calculus. And with such a background, the chances of they're ever getting into a technical area are vanishingly small. So this is what we're really dealing with. And I think you have to keep that in mind as you consider whether you should keep core standards. Thank you.